The stars bent and twisted as 3,000 warships tore through the fabric of space. Admiral stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the blue planet grow larger on his viewing screen. Earth, such a small world, such easy prey. Had conquered 47 planets in his long career, he knew exactly how this would go. The primitive species would panic. They would send their tiny ships to fight. Those ships would burn. Then the survivors would kneel and accept rule. It was always the same story. "Admiral," his second-in-command said, "we have arrived at the designated coordinates. The fleet is in standard conquest formation." Nodded slowly. His gray skin reflected the dim blue lights of the command deck. His 4 eyes studied the planet below with cold interest. Intelligence reports said these creatures called themselves humans. They had only discovered space travel a few decades ago. They were still fighting wars among themselves, primitive, divided, weak. "Begin the broadcast," ordered. "Let them know their new masters have arrived." Across every radio frequency, every television channel, every communication system on Earth, the same message played. His face appeared on billions of screens. His voice, translated into every human language, delivered words that had broken the spirit of countless species before. "People of Earth, I am Admiral of the Imperial fleet. Your planet now belongs to the Empire. You will surrender all weapons. You will present your leaders for judgment. You will accept rule. You have one rotation of your planet to comply. If you resist, you will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The message ended. Leaned back in his command chair with satisfaction. Now they would wait. Now the fear would spread across that little blue world like a disease. 7,000 miles below, in the underground command center beneath Seoul, Lieutenant Commander Park stared at her screen with wide eyes. She was 29 years old. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life, but training and reality were very different things. "Contact confirmed," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 3,000 plus vessels. They matched the profile exactly. General walked up behind her. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and a face full of deep lines. He had commanded this facility for 15 years, waiting for a day he hoped would never come. "Show me," he said quietly. Pulled up the tactical display. Red dots filled the space between Earth and Mars. So many dots, so many ships. Any normal person looking at this screen would feel only despair. But smiled. "They came," he said, "just like the artifact predicted. Same formation, same numbers, same arrogance." Turned to look at him. "Sir, should I contact the Council?" "Yes, tell them Operation Counterstrike is now active," placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "And tell them we're ready." In Geneva, Switzerland, President Han received the call in the middle of the night. She was already awake. She had been unable to sleep for 3 days, ever since the deep space sensors detected the approaching fleet. Now, as she walked into the emergency council chamber, she felt strangely calm. The room was filled with the leaders of every nation on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, scientists, all of them knew the secret. All of them had spent years preparing for this night. "The fleet has arrived," announced. "They have issued their ultimatum. They expect us to surrender or die." She paused, looking around the room at the determined faces. "They have made a terrible mistake." Fleet Admiral Lee stepped forward. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and steady hands. He had spent 30 years building Earth's secret fleet. "Our forces are in position," he reported. 800 ships hiding in Neptune's magnetic field. They have no idea we're there. They think our only vessels are the civilian craft in Earth orbit." "What about the virus?" asked. The lead cyber warfare specialist answered from his seat. He was young, barely 35, but he had created the most dangerous computer program in human history. "Ready to deploy on your command, Madam President. Our probes have been intercepting communications for decades. We know every weakness in their systems. When we strike, their entire fleet will go dark. Nodded. This was the moment 40 years of preparation had been building toward. 40 years ago, a research team in Antarctica had found something buried deep in the ice. It was old, impossibly old, a probe sent by a species that had died a million years before humans existed. Inside that probe was a warning and a gift. The warning was simple: the Empire would come. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. Earth would be next. The gift was knowledge, technology, blueprints for weapons and shields and engines that humanity could barely understand. But humans were clever. They learned fast, and they kept their learning secret. While the rest of the galaxy saw humanity as primitive farmers playing with rockets, the truth was very different. Underground factories built warships with alien technology. Secret programs modified human genes to make soldiers stronger and faster. Cyber warfare divisions studied code until they knew it better than themselves. The whole world had worked together on this project. Every nation, every government. For the first time in human history, there were no more secrets between countries. There was only one secret, the secret they kept from the stars. On Neptune's dark side, Commander stood on the bridge of the Unyielding. His ship was beautiful, sleek, and angular, nothing like the clumsy vessels humanity showed the galaxy. Around him, 799 other ships waited in perfect silence. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Shin, looked up from her console. "Commander, we're receiving the signal from Earth Command. Operation Counterstrike is active." Felt his pulse quicken. This was it. Everything humanity had worked for came down to the next few hours. "All ships," he said into the fleet-wide channel, "this is Commander. The enemy has arrived. They think they've come to conquer helpless prey. They think this will be easy." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They are wrong. Today we show the galaxy what humans can do. Today we remind the universe why you should never underestimate our species. All crews to battle stations. We move on my command." Across the hidden fleet, men and women prepared for war. They were farmers' children and factory workers' sons and daughters. They were people who had grown up looking at the stars with wonder, never knowing that something terrible was coming. But they had trained, they had prepared, and they were ready. Back in the Seoul Command Center, watched the fleet on her screen. The enemy ships moved slowly toward Earth, confident and careless. They had no idea that death was waiting for them in the darkness. General stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the display. 40 years, he murmured. 40 years of secrets. 40 years of building and planning and hopping. We would never need to use any of it. And now asked. His expression hardened. Now we use all of it, every weapon, every ship, every trick we've learned. He looked down at the young officer beside him. They came here thinking they would find sheep. Instead, they found wolves. On the Eternal Conquest, Admiral grew impatient. The humans had not responded to his ultimatum. No surrender, no begging, just silence. Perhaps their communication systems are too primitive to reply properly, his adjutant suggested. Perhaps, agreed, but something felt wrong. He had conquered many worlds. He knew what fear looked like. Every other species had responded instantly, either with desperate pleas or futile threats, but these humans offered nothing at all. It was almost as if they were waiting for something. Push the thought away. It was impossible. These creatures had barely left their own planet. They had nothing that could threaten a battle fleet, nothing at all. He was wrong. In the cold darkness beyond Neptune, 800 human warships powered up their engines, their weapons charged with silent energy. Their crews sat at their stations with focused eyes and steady hearts. Humanity was done hiding. The real war was about to begin. Admiral walked through the halls of his flagship with growing irritation. 6 hours had passed since his ultimatum. 6 hours of silence from the planet below. It made no sense. Every other species in the galaxy had responded with either submission or defiance within the first hour, but these humans simply ignored him. Perhaps they are discussing among themselves, his advisor suggested, struggling to keep pace with the Admiral's long strides. Our intelligence says they have many different governments, many different leaders. Perhaps they cannot agree on how to respond. Snorted, then they are even more foolish than I thought. Division is weakness. A species that cannot unite does not deserve to survive. He entered the Strategic Command Center, where dozens of officers monitored the fleet's position. 3,000 ships formed a perfect sphere around the blue planet, blocking any escape. Standard conquest formation. The same formation that had worked on 1,000 worlds before. Any movement from their vessels, demanded. Negative, Admiral. Their orbital craft remained stationary, primitive communication satellites, a few cargo vessels, nothing that poses any threat. Studied the tactical display. Earth's so-called space fleet was laughable, a handful of clumsy stations. Some exploration ships barely capable of reaching their own moon. He had seen farming communities with better technology. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. Send destroyers to disable their orbital infrastructure. Show them we are serious. 20 destroyers broke formation and moved toward Earth's orbit. Their weapons powered up, ready to turn humanity's fragile space stations into burning debris. On Earth, President Han watched the enemy ships approach on the main display in Geneva. The council members shifted nervously in their seats. This was the most dangerous part of the plan, letting the enemy get close enough to feel confident, but not close enough to cause real damage. Steady, she said calmly. We stick to the timeline. Defense Minister spoke up. Madam President, if those destroyers fire on our stations, we will lose thousands of people. They won't fire, replied. Not yet. They want to scare us into surrender, not destroy valuable slaves. She spoke the word with disgust. To them, we're livestock. They want us alive and working. Fleet Admiral Lee nodded in agreement. Our intelligence confirms this. The conquer for labor, not destruction. They'll threaten, they'll posture, but they won't attack civilian targets until they've lost patience. And how long until that happens? Asked. Checked his data pad. Based on their standard protocols, they'll give us another 18 hours before escalating to direct military action. That gives us plenty of time. In the Seoul Command Center, Lieutenant Commander Park tracked the approaching destroyers with steady hands. Her heart was pounding, but her training kept her focused. General stood beside her, watching every movement on the screen. They're taking the bait, reported, moving exactly as predicted. Allowed himself a small smile. The artifact was right about everything, their tactics, their formations, even their psychology. 1,000,000 years ago, someone studied these conquerors and wrote down every weakness. Now we're going to exploit them all. Thought about the artifact often. She had never seen it herself. Only a handful of scientists had that privilege, but she had read the reports. An ancient probe, buried in Antarctic ice for longer than humans had existed as a species. Inside, a desperate message from a dying civilization. They called themselves Their world had been the Empire's first conquest, 1,000,000 years ago. They had fought bravely but lost everything. In their final days, they built probes and sent them to young planets throughout the galaxy. Planets where intelligent life might one day evolve. Planets that might have a chance to succeed where they had failed. Earth received one of those probes, this gift to a species that wouldn't exist for another 1,000,000 years. Inside the probe was everything humanity needed. Blueprints for advanced technology, detailed analysis of weapons and tactics, and most importantly, a warning. They were coming. They always came, and species that weren't ready died. Humanity had been very, very busy getting ready. On Neptune's far side, Commander ran final checks on the fleet. Every ship reported ready. Every weapon was charged. Every pilot was in position. Lieutenant Shin approached with a data pad. Commander, latest intelligence from Earth Command. They have sent 20 destroyers toward Earth orbit. They're testing our response. An Earth response. Civilian channels are broadcasting panic. News stations are showing frightened crowds. Government officials are giving speeches about peace and negotiation. Smiled slightly. All according to script. Nodded with approval. The entire planet was putting on a performance. Every news broadcast, every government statement, every apparent moment of chaos, all carefully staged to make them believe they were dealing with a helpless, divided species. Meanwhile, the real military hid in the darkness, waiting. "How long until we move?" asked. "Soon. We need them deeper in the trap. When their main fleet crosses Mars orbit, we strike." Aboard the destroyer Swift Judgment, Captain watched Earth grow larger through the forward viewport. Such a beautiful planet. Blue water, green land, white clouds. It would make an excellent addition to the Empire. "Captain," his sensor officer reported, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the planet's surface." "What kind of readings?" "Uncertain. They appear and disappear too quickly for proper analysis. Possibly natural phenomena." Dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "This species has nothing that could threaten us. Continue approach." He was detecting the power signatures of humanity's hidden defense grid, thousands of emplacements buried beneath mountains and oceans, waiting to activate. But the readings were too brief, too scattered. The sensors couldn't make sense of them. In Geneva, monitored his systems with obsessive attention. The virus was ready. Years of work, condensed into a few million lines of code. When deployed, it would infect every computer system simultaneously, exploiting vulnerabilities that the Empire didn't even know existed. Status report, President requested through the communication link. "All cyber weapons are armed and ready, Madam President. Just give the word." "Not yet. We need their main fleet in position first. Patience." Forced himself to relax. Patience. After 40 years of preparation, a few more hours would not matter, but the waiting was the hardest part. On the Eternal Conquest, Admiral received reports from his destroyer squadron. They had reached Earth orbit without resistance. The humans' pitiful stations floated helplessly nearby, making no attempt to flee or fight. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet. It appears to be their leadership." "Finally," said with satisfaction, "put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human female in formal clothing. She had dark hair and calm eyes. Behind her stood several other humans, all wearing expressions of grave concern. "This is President Han of the United Earth Council," the woman said. "We have received your ultimatum." Leaned forward. "Then you understand your situation. Surrender is your only option." "We understand that you have come a very long way," replied. "We understand that your empire has conquered many worlds. We understand that you believe this will be easy." She paused, and something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been amusement. "We simply wish to inform you that we are considering our options. Please be patient with us. These are difficult decisions." Frowned. The woman's tone was wrong. She should be terrified. She should be begging. Instead, she spoke like someone playing a game she had already won. "You have 12 more hours," growled. "If we do not receive your complete surrender by then, we will begin systematic destruction of your population centers." "Understood, Admiral. We will be in touch." The transmission ended. Sat in silence for a long moment, troubled by something he couldn't quite name. "Admiral," his adjutant ventured, "is something wrong?" "That woman," said slowly, "she wasn't afraid." Perhaps humans express fear differently than other species. Perhaps, but couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important, something dangerous. He pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter. No matter what tricks these primitives might have, they couldn't match 3,000 warships. Nothing in the galaxy could. In 16 hours, this world would belong to the Empire. These strange, unafraid humans would learn their place. They would kneel like all the others. They had no choice. Far beyond the fleet's sensors, hidden in Neptune's shadow, Commander watched the clock count down. Soon, they would learn a valuable lesson about underestimating humanity. Soon, the trap would close. And then the real battle would begin. The fleet crossed Mars orbit at exactly 3:47 hours Earth Standard Time. 3,000 warships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charged, their crews confident of easy victory. Admiral had grown tired of waiting for the humans to respond properly. He decided to move the fleet closer to demonstrate his power. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Advance to attack position. We will show these primitives the price of defiance." The massive armada glided through space, blocking out the stars. Crews went about their duties with bored efficiency. This was routine for them. Another primitive world. Another easy conquest. Some of the younger officers were disappointed there would be no real battle. The veterans knew better than to complain about easy victories. On Earth, alarms sounded in every command center across the planet. The moment had arrived. 40 years of preparation came down to the next few minutes. In Geneva, President Han stood before the council. "The enemy fleet has entered the engagement zone. Begin Operation Counterstrike." In Seoul, General gave the order that Lieutenant Commander Park had been waiting her entire life to hear. "Activate the virus. Light them up." In his cyber warfare bunker, pressed a single button. The effect was instantaneous. Across all 3,000 vessels, systems failed simultaneously. Navigation computers crashed. Weapons went offline. Shields flickered and died. Communication networks filled with static. Even the lights dimmed as power systems struggled against the digital attack. On the Eternal Conquest, Admiral watched in horror as his command deck went dark. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the faces of his panicking crew. "What is happening?" he roared. "Report." "Admiral, we've lost main power. Navigation is offline. Weapons are not responding." His officers shouted over each other, their voices filled with terror. "This is impossible," grabbed a support rail as the ship shuddered. "Our systems are protected against electronic attack. No species has ever." "Admiral, the entire fleet is affected. Every ship is reporting the same failures." Blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. They had the most advanced computer systems in the galaxy. Their firewalls were impenetrable. Their code was perfect. But someone had found a way in. Watched the results of his virus with quiet satisfaction. Every weakness, every flaw in programming. Humanity had found them all during 40 years of intercepting enemy communications. The virus didn't just disable their systems. It made their own computers work against them. "Phase 1 complete," he reported to Geneva. "Enemy fleet is blind and paralyzed. Estimated recovery time, 47 minutes. President nodded. "Begin Phase 2. Far across the solar system, Commander received the signal he had been waiting for. "All ships," he announced over the fleet channel, "the enemy is disabled. Execute jump sequence. We end this now." 800 human warships activated their jump drives simultaneously. The technology allowed precision jumps that no other species in the galaxy could match. While ships needed millions of kilometers of empty space to emerge safely from faster-than-light travel, human vessels could appear within meters of their target. Space bent and twisted. Reality folded in on itself. And suddenly, 800 deadly warships materialized directly behind the formation. Lieutenant Shin studied her tactical display. "Perfect jump. All ships in position. Enemy fleet has not detected us. They're still trying to restore their sensors." Stood on the bridge of the unyielding, watching the enemy fleet drift helplessly before him. These were the conquerors of 1,000 worlds, the terror of the galaxy, and they had no idea death was standing right behind them. "All weapons free," he commanded. "Fire at will." 800 spoke at once. The weapons were simple in concept but devastating in execution. Magnetic rails accelerated tungsten slugs to 3% of. No shields in the galaxy were designed to stop kinetic weapons. Everyone had moved to energy-based defense systems centuries ago. But humans remembered the power of a rock thrown very, very hard. The first volley tore through a dozen ships before they could react. Tungsten slugs punched through hulls like paper. Reactors breached. Ammunition stores exploded. Ships that had conquered entire civilizations became expanding clouds of debris. On the Eternal Conquest, Admiral felt his flagship shudder from nearby explosions. "What was that?" Report. "Admiral, we're under attack. Ships are being destroyed throughout the formation." "By what? Our sensors are still offline." "Unknown hostile vessels, Admiral. They appeared out of nowhere. They're everywhere." His mind raced. This was impossible. Humans were primitive. They had no fleet. They had no weapons. Intelligence had confirmed it. Unless everything humanity had shown the galaxy was a lie. Lieutenant Park commanded the destroyer Defiance with cold efficiency. Her ship dove through the disabled formation, selecting targets with surgical precision. "Helm, bring us around to bearing 347. Target that carrier's reactor section." "Aye, Commander." The Defiance executed a turn that would have killed any normal crew, but people weren't normal. Genetic modifications, another gift from the artifact, allowed them to withstand forces that would crush ordinary human bodies. While pilots blacked out at 10 times Earth gravity, human pilots stayed conscious at 25. Firing solution locked. Fire. 3 tungsten rounds struck the carrier within a quarter-second of each other. The massive ship's reactor breached, releasing a burst of energy that consumed the carrier and 3 escort vessels nearby. Was already selecting her next target. "Good kill. Move to secondary targets. Don't let them recover." Across the battlefield, human ships hunted with predatory grace. They moved in coordinated packs, overwhelming enemy vessels before they could restore power. They tried to fight back. Some ships managed to bring weapons online briefly, but without working sensors, they fired blind, hitting nothing but empty space. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, over 2,000 ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors drifted among fields of debris, their crews surrendering or dying. Admiral stood on the darkened bridge of his crippled flagship, watching destruction unfold through the only working viewport. His fleet, his invincible fleet, destroyed by a species his empire had classified as pre-industrial agricultural. "How," he whispered, "how is this possible?" No one answered, no one could. On the unyielding, Commander surveyed the aftermath with grim satisfaction. "Casualty report," he requested. Lieutenant checked her displays. 12 human vessels destroyed, 37 damaged, total crew losses estimated at 400. 400 lives. Felt the weight of each one. But 400 was nothing compared to what they had prevented. If they had conquered Earth, billions would have died or been enslaved. "The enemy flagship?" he asked. "Disabled but intact. Their admiral is still alive." "Good, prepare boarding parties. We want prisoners." "Sir, the remaining enemy vessels are attempting to flee." Watch the tactical display. A few hundred ships were trying to restore their jump drives, desperate to escape the slaughter. He could destroy them easily, but that wasn't the plan. "Let some go," he ordered. "Let them run home and tell their empire what happened here. Let them spread fear the way they spread it among their conquered worlds." The surviving ships vanished into hyperspace, fleeing toward their home systems. They would carry stories of what they had witnessed, stories of a primitive species that wasn't primitive at all, stories of impossible technology and impossible warriors, stories that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On Earth, the celebrations began before the battle was even officially over. People poured into streets around the world, laughing and crying and holding each other. 40 years of secret preparation had paid off. Humanity had faced its first alien invasion and won decisively. In Geneva, President Han addressed the United Earth Council. "We have won the battle," she said, "but the war is far from over. The Empire spans half the galaxy. They will not accept this defeat quietly. They will return with more ships, more weapons, more anger." She paused, looking around the room at the tired but triumphant faces. "But they will also return with fear. For the first time in their history, the Empire has been humiliated. For the first time, a conquest has failed, and that changes everything." In the Seoul Command Center, Lieutenant Commander Park finally allowed herself to breathe. She had watched the impossible happen. She had helped make it happen, and now humanity's place in the universe would never be the same. General placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well, Lieutenant Commander. Your team did well. Today, we showed the galaxy what humans can do." Nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The stars above suddenly seemed less terrifying. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. And this time, they would be ready. The corridors of the Eternal Conquest were filled with smoke and screaming. Emergency lights flickered red and orange as Admiral stumbled through the wreckage of his once glorious flagship. Bodies lay everywhere. His crew, his officers, his friends, killed by a species that shouldn't have been able to kill anyone. "Admiral," a young officer grabbed his arm. "The humans are boarding us. We need to get you to the escape pods." Shook his head. "There will be no escape. Don't you understand? They let some ships flee. They wanted survivors to spread the word. But the flagship, the Admiral," he laughed bitterly. "They want me alive. They want answers." The bulkhead behind them exploded inward. Through the smoke came figures in sleek black armor, humans, moving with impossible speed and coordination. Their weapons made no sound, but guards fell wherever they pointed. The young officer raised his sidearm. One of the human soldiers shot him before he could fire. The weapon hit him with a blue flash, and he collapsed unconscious rather than dead. "Non-lethal weapons," observed. "You truly do want prisoners." The lead soldier removed her helmet. She was female with sharp features and cold eyes. "Admiral of the Imperial fleet, you are now a prisoner of the United Earth Defense Force. You will be treated according to the laws of warfare. You will not be harmed if you cooperate. Do you understand?" Looked at the destruction around him. His fleet was gone. His crew was dead or captured. Everything he had believed about the universe was wrong. "I understand," he said quietly. "I understand that I was a fool." 12 hours later, Admiral sat in a clean white room somewhere on Earth. They had given him food and water. They had treated his wounds. They had even provided comfortable furniture. It was nothing like the treatment conquered species received from the. The door opened and several humans entered. He recognized one of them, the woman from the transmission, the one who hadn't been afraid, President Han. She sat across from him, studying his face with curious eyes. "Admiral, I hope you've been treated well." "Better than I deserved," admitted. "Better than my empire would have treated your people." "We know, we've been studying your empire for a very long time," gestured to one of her companions, a man in military uniform. "This is Fleet Admiral Lee. He has some things to show you." Activated a holographic display. A map of the galaxy appeared with the Empire highlighted in red. Thousands of star systems, hundreds of conquered species, the greatest power in known space. "Your empire has existed for 1 million years," said. "In that time, you have conquered over 1,000 intelligent species. You have enslaved trillions of individuals. You have destroyed entire civilizations that refuse to submit. Said nothing. These were facts, not accusations. Your empire is built on a simple assumption, continued. Once a species is conquered, they stay conquered. Your control systems, your slave collars, your orbital weapons, they keep the subject races obedient. No species has ever successfully rebelled against rule. Because rebellion is impossible, replied. We control everything: communications, transportation, resources, weapons. A conquered species cannot coordinate, cannot arm themselves, cannot fight. Leaned forward. What if someone gave them the tools to do all of those things? Frowned. What do you mean? Changed the display. Now it showed small dots spreading outward from Earth, thousands of them, traveling in all directions. While you were coming here, explained, we sent automated probes to every slave world in your empire. These probes carry two things. First, a message. You are no longer alone. Help is coming. Second, a copy of the virus that disabled your fleet. His 4 eyes went wide with shock. You cannot be serious. You would destabilize the entire empire. There would be chaos, wars, billions would die. Billions are already dying, said coldly. Dying in your slave camps, dying in your minds, dying because your empire decided they were less than beings. We are simply giving them a chance to fight back. But the consequences... The consequences are freedom, Defense Minister interrupted. He had been standing silently in the corner, but now he stepped forward with barely contained anger. My grandmother's grandmother lived through occupation. She told stories of what it meant to have your home taken, your culture destroyed, your children stolen. She would weep with joy to see what we are doing today. Fell silent. He had never thought about conquered species as people with grandmothers. They were resources, labor, numbers on a spreadsheet. The idea that they had stories, traditions, dreams, it had simply never occurred to him. There's something else you should know, said. Her voice had softened slightly. We didn't develop our technology alone. 40 years ago, we found something buried in our ice, a probe from a species called the repeated. The name sparked something in his memory, ancient history lessons, the first conquest, a species so primitive they had been subjugated in days. Your empire's first victims, confirmed. 1,000,000 years ago, they saw what was coming. They couldn't save themselves, but they could save others. They built probes and sent them throughout the galaxy, carrying warnings and technology to species that didn't yet exist. We found one of those probes, added. It told us everything: your tactics, your weaknesses, your schedule. It gave us blueprints for shields and weapons and engines that your empire has never seen. They died 1,000,000 years ago, but their final act just destroyed everything your people built. Sat in stunned silence. He thought of all the species they had conquered, all the civilizations they had destroyed. And now he learned that their very first victims had found a way to strike back across 1,000,000 years of time. It was, he had to admit, an impressive revenge. What happens now? He asked finally. That depends on you, replied. You can help us, or you can remain a prisoner. Either way, your empire is finished. The only question is how many more people die before it's over. Help you how? Information, codes, tactical data, things that will help the slave species fight more effectively and reduce casualties on all sides. His expression was serious but not unkind. You were a soldier following orders. We're not interested in punishing individuals. We're interested in ending an empire. Considered his options. Refuse and spend the rest of his life in a comfortable prison while his empire burned. Cooperate and perhaps save some of his people in the process. Your species is remarkable, he said slowly. In 1,000 conquests, we never encountered anything like you. The message said you would be different. I didn't believe it. I should have believed it. He straightened in his chair. Very well, I will help you. Not because I believe your cause is just. My people have committed many crimes, but they are still my people. I will help you because the alternative is watching everything burn without purpose. At least this way, some good might come from the destruction. Nodded, that's all we can ask. Outside the interrogation room, General was waiting with Lieutenant Commander Park. He agreed to cooperate, told them as she exited. We'll need secure facilities for the debriefing. Already arranged, replied. Madam President, there's something you should see. The probes we sent to the slave worlds were starting to receive responses. He handed her a data pad. Messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved were receiving humanity's transmission. They were learning that the virus worked. They were coordinating. They were planning. Read some of the messages. Words of hope from beings who had never known hope. Promises to fight from species that had been forbidden to even think of resistance. Thank you, sent from a dozen different star systems in a dozen different languages. We've started something that can't be stopped, she murmured. For better or worse, the galaxy will never be the same. Looked at the data pad over her shoulder. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Madam President? Thought about it for a long moment. I honestly don't know. Freedom is never clean. It's messy and painful and people die for it. But slavery is worse. It's quiet and orderly and people die forever. She handed back the data pad. Tell the fleet to prepare for Phase 3. They will send reinforcements when they learn what happened. We need to be ready. As they walked through the corridors of Earth's new future, wondered what they would think if they could see this moment. Their desperate gamble, made 1,000,000 years ago, was finally paying off. They had died so that others might live free. And now, because of them, the greatest empire in galactic history was about to fall. 2 weeks after the battle, the galaxy began to burn. It started slowly. A mining colony in the outer territories went silent. Then a manufacturing world stopped sending shipments. Then entire sectors simply stopped responding to commands. The virus humanity had spread was doing its work, disabling control systems and communication networks across 1,000 worlds. And where the virus opened cracks, the slaves poured through. Species that had been conquered for centuries rose up against their masters. The peaceful species enslaved 500 years ago seized control of their planet's orbital stations. The brutal warriors broken by defeat long ago remembered how to fight. The tiny beings used as domestic servants sabotaged their owners' ships from within. On Earth, President Han watched the reports come in with mixed feelings. Freedom was spreading across the galaxy, but so was violence. The garrison on Talon Prime was massacred, Fleet Admiral Lee reported during the morning briefing. No survivors. The local population had been enslaved for 800 years. They weren't interested in taking prisoners. We expected this, Defense Minister said grimly. You cannot enslave people for centuries and expect them to be merciful when they finally break free. They are reaping what they sowed. The Empire is mobilizing its core fleets, continued. They're abandoning the outer territories to focus on protecting their home systems. We estimate they still have approximately 10,000 warships in reserve. Frowned, 10,000. That's more than 10 times our fleet. Yes, but our technology is superior and their forces are spread thin dealing with rebellions. More importantly, they're scared. The survivors of the battle at Earth have been spreading stories. They call us demons, ghosts. They say we can appear anywhere at any time. They say our weapons cannot be stopped. They say we cannot be killed. Can we use that fear? Asked. We already are. Several colonies have surrendered without a fight when they learned human ships were approaching. They would rather submit to us than face our weapons. In another part of the facility, Admiral was reviewing data with his human handlers. He had been cooperating fully, providing codes and tactical information that accelerated the Empire's collapse by months. Some humans treated him with hatred. Others treated him with pity. He wasn't sure which was worse. Tell me about the Emperor, Park asked. She had been assigned as one of his liaisons, a young woman barely half his age, but with intelligence and determination that reminded him of officers twice her experience. Emperor VII said, "He is old, perhaps 200 years by your counting. He has ruled for 60 of those years. He is not cruel by standards. He simply views other species as resources to be managed, not people to be considered." Will he negotiate? Laughed bitterly. The do not negotiate. We conquer or we die. Those are the only options our culture recognizes. We'll fight until his last ship is destroyed, and then he will destroy himself rather than surrender. Made notes on her data pad. That's going to make this more difficult. You don't understand. The Empire is not just a government. It is an identity. For 1,000,000 years, we have been the masters of the galaxy. The idea that we could lose, that we could be defeated by primitives, it is incomprehensible. Many of my people would rather die than live in a universe where are not supreme. Then many of your people will die, said quietly. Nodded, yes, they will, and I find myself wondering if perhaps that is justice. Meanwhile, humanity was not idle. Earth's factories worked around the clock, producing more ships, more weapons, more supplies. Young men and women volunteered in numbers that overwhelmed the training facilities. Everyone wanted to be part of the force that had humiliated the galaxy's greatest empire. Commander, now promoted to admiral, oversaw the expansion of the fleet. His flagship Unyielding had become a symbol of human defiance, the ship that had led the charge against 3,000 enemies and emerged victorious. Status report, he requested during his morning briefing. Lieutenant Shin, promoted to commander for her role in the battle, pulled up the displays. Fleet strength is now 1,200 ships. We've brought 600 new vessels online in the past 2 weeks, with more arriving daily. Training programs have been accelerated, but quality remains high. The other species. 14 former slave races have requested alliance with humanity. They're sending representatives to Earth for negotiations. Several have already begun contributing ships and personnel to the combined fleet. Nodded thoughtfully, and the response. Intelligence suggests they're preparing a major offensive. Their core fleets are gathering near their capital system. We estimate they'll move against us within the month. Let them come, study the tactical displays with calm confidence. Every day they wait, we grow stronger. Every day more species join our cause. Every day their empire shrinks. On the former slave world of Prime, a revolution was reaching its conclusion. There had been legendary warriors before their conquest 3 centuries ago. They had broken their spirit through systematic brutality, turning them into labor animals for heavy industry. Now, for the first time in 300 years, they were fighting again. General watched the reports from his command center in Seoul. They were winning, but the cost was terrible. Entire cities burned. Millions died on both sides. Freedom, it seemed, came with a price paid in blood. General, a communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from Prime. Their leader wants to speak with humanity's representative. Took the call. The screen showed a massive figure, over 3 meters tall, with gray skin and fierce golden eyes. The called him, which translated roughly to unbroken. Human General, rumbled. Your virus freed us. Your message gave us hope. My people owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. We did only what was right, replied. No species should be enslaved. The thought otherwise. For 300 years they treated us as animals. They worked our children to death in their minds. They killed any who showed spirit. His massive hands clenched into fists. Now we kill them. We kill them all. Is this justice? Considered the question carefully. Justice would be making them understand what they did, making them feel the suffering they caused. But that's impossible. Some crimes are too great for true justice. All that remains is stopping the crime and ensuring it never happens again. Nodded slowly. Wise words. When this war is over, that will stand with humanity. We will fight beside you against any enemy. This I swear. The transmission ended. Leaned back in his chair, exhausted. Every day brought new allies, new victories, new horrors. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war that lasted 7 minutes. Now he was helping to reshape an entire galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Park entered his office with a cup of tea, a small kindness she had adopted since the battle. The Council is requesting your presence, sir. President Han wants to discuss the alliance proposals. Accepted the tea gratefully. How many now? 17 species, sir. Some of them are powerful. They have fleets and technology that could significantly strengthen our position. Others are small, barely a few million survivors. But they all want the same thing: protection and partnership with humanity. And what do we want in return? Smiled slightly. That's what the Council needs to decide. We've become the leaders of a galactic revolution. The question is what kind of leaders we want to be. Stood and straightened his uniform. The weight of history pressed down on his shoulders. 40 years ago, humanity had discovered it was not alone in the universe. Now, humans were deciding the fate of countless worlds. They sent their message to save other species from he said thoughtfully. They could have tried to save only themselves. They could have been selfish. But they chose to think about the future, about species that didn't even exist yet. He walked toward the door, then paused. I think we should honor that choice. We should be the kind of leaders they hoped we would be, not conquerors, not masters, partners, protectors, friends. Nodded. I'll make sure the Council knows your recommendation, sir. As walked through the corridors toward the meeting that would shape the future of the galaxy, he thought about all the species reaching out to humanity. Former slaves seeking freedom, former warriors seeking purpose, former victims seeking justice. The Empire had ruled through fear and force. Humanity would build something different, something better. Or at least they would try.